You remember the mask, the whip, the sword slashes that carved a Z not just into villains, but into your childhood. You remember Antonio Banderas spinning, slicing, smirking through candlelit duels, Catherine Zeta-Jones stealing whole scenes with one glare, and Anthony Hopkins as the original Zorro, aged, betrayed, burning with dignity. But what if the story behind the Mask of Zorro is even wilder than the legend it tells? This wasn't just a swashbuckling comeback for a forgotten hero. It was a chaotic, nearly doomed production that battled rewrites, casting wars, broken bones, erupting tempers, and one very confused horse. This is the tale of a film that bled through every frame and left scars no mask could hide. We're about to unsheath 20 weird cinematic facts you didn't know. Some will make you laugh, some might make you wince, and all of them will change how you watch the movie forever. And hey, if this kind of behind-the-scenes swordplay is your thing, hit subscribe. We're aiming for 1,000 subscribers this month, and every click helps us keep digging up the legends buried beneath your favorite films. Because heroes wear masks. But truth? That always leaves a mark. 1. Steven Spielberg was the hidden blade behind Zorro's return. You don't see his name in lights. You don't hear his voice behind the camera. But the Mask of Zorro exists because of Steven Spielberg. After the massive success of Jurassic Park and Schindler's List, Spielberg turned his attention to reviving an old swashbuckling legend, Zorro. He had grown up watching Guy Williams' black-clad outlaw on TV and believed the world was ready for a romantic, sweeping, old-school adventure. DreamWorks, his newly formed studio, needed a blockbuster. So Spielberg personally developed the project for years, attached directors, oversaw casting, and fine-tuned the script through endless rewrites. He even helped guide tone and structure, ensuring the film struck the delicate balance between camp and grit, legend and legacy. For a time, he even wanted Zorro to launch a cinematic universe, long before that was a buzzword. Spielberg originally wanted Robert Rodriguez to direct, but creative clashes over budget and tone derailed that version. So, Martin Campbell, fresh off GoldenEye, was brought in to tame the chaos. The result? A movie that feels like a forgotten classic, not because it stumbled into greatness, but because one of Hollywood's greatest showmen was quietly pulling the strings behind the curtain. 2. Robert Rodriguez was fired for dreaming too big. Before swords clashed and masks dropped, Zorro almost took a very different path, one soaked in blood, bullets, and a hyper-stylized Latin pulp aesthetic. That version was directed by Robert Rodriguez. Yes, Desperado Robert Rodriguez. Spielberg originally hired him to helm The Mask of Zorro, hoping for a modern, edgy reimagining. But Rodriguez's vision was explosive and expensive. He wanted the film bloodier, louder, more violent, and dripping with his signature grindhouse flair. DreamWorks panicked. Rodriguez wanted $45 million. They capped it at $35 million. He refused to compromise. They let him go. It was a clash of styles, vision, and tempo. The studio didn't want a grindhouse epic. They wanted a family-friendly blockbuster with romantic flair and heroic nostalgia. In his place, they hired Martin Campbell, an older school director with a Bond film under his belt and the discipline to rein in chaos. Rodriguez would later turn those creative frustrations into Once Upon a Time in Mexico, but he never looked back. And neither did Zorro. The version we got? Polished, grand, elegant. But somewhere out there, in some parallel timeline, Zorro rides through a rain of bullets and mariachi gunfire, whispering the name of the director who almost burned the mask down. 3. Antonio Banderas had never touched a sword before filming. Zorro is grace, precision, elegance in motion. But when Antonio Banderas signed on to play Alejandro Murrieta, the man who becomes Zorro, he had never picked up a sword in his life, not even in stage combat. The swashbuckling fluidity you see on screen? That took months of grueling, obsessive training. Director Martin Campbell brought in legendary swordmaster Bob Anderson, the same man who trained Mark Hamill, Errol Flynn's successors, and countless stunt fighters in Hollywood. Anderson pushed Banderas to the brink. 6 hours a day of fencing drills, footwork, stance control, reaction speed, and choreographed dueling. Banderas practiced between takes, during lunch, after rap, bleeding from blisters and trying not to trip over his own cape. He was determined not to use a double unless absolutely necessary. By the time the cameras rolled, he could duel at full speed with Hopkins, whose own choreography demanded precise timing and complex counters. The sword became a language, and Banderas became fluent. You don't just watch a man become Zorro, you feel him earn it, stroke by stroke, swing by swing. That's not special effects. That's sweat and repetition and an actor refusing to let the mask wear him. 4. Anthony Hopkins was cast. When Sean Connery said no. Before Anthony Hopkins put on the mask, it was meant to be Sean Connery's face beneath it. Connery was Spielberg's first choice to play Don Diego de la Vega, the original Zorro turned aging mentor. And honestly, it made sense. Connery had the gravitas, the action chops, the world-weary charm. He had already played the wise elder in Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade. But Connery passed, reportedly due to scheduling conflicts and concerns about the script's tone. He wasn't sure if it was trying to be a drama, a romance, or a Saturday morning cartoon. With Connery gone, the studio scrambled. They approached Anthony Hopkins, who had never done a swashbuckling adventure before. At first, he hesitated, but then something clicked. Hopkins saw Don Diego as a tragic figure, a man haunted by loss, betrayal, and vengeance. He brought Shakespearean weight to the role, adding nuance and dignity to what could have been a throwaway part. And he didn't phone it in. Hopkins trained in fencing, performed many of his own stunts, and even did accent work to blend in with the Spanish colonial setting. The result? A mentor with soul, and a performance that cuts deeper than the blade he wields. 5. Catherine Zeta-Jones got the role in just one audition. In a film packed with legends and veterans, Catherine Zeta-Jones was the unknown. She was barely a blip on the Hollywood radar in 1997. A few British TV shows, a handful of small film roles. But when she walked into her audition for the Mask of Zorro, everything stopped. It wasn't just the look, though she had that in spades. It was her presence, her timing, her confidence. Spielberg was reportedly blown away. So was Martin Campbell. She read once, maybe twice. And that was it. She got the part of Elena, the daughter of Zorro, and the emotional fulcrum of the film, after a single audition. No callbacks, no screen tests. They just knew. What followed was a transformation. Zeta-Jones trained in swordsmanship, flamenco dancing, horseback riding, and period etiquette. She threw herself into the role with a ferocity that matched her co-stars. That sword duel with Banderas? Half rehearsal, half adrenaline, no doubles, all sweat. And when the film premiered, it was clear. A star had arrived. Within 2 years, she'd win an Oscar. But it all started here, with one room, one audition, and a mask waiting for someone bold enough to wear it. 6. The film shut down for weeks after Banderas got hurt. There's a moment in The Mask of Zorro where Alejandro leaps from a burning tower onto a galloping horse. It looks seamless, effortless, like a legend reborn. But that moment, like so many in the film, came at a steep cost. Antonio Banderas, determined to do as many of his own stunts as possible, trained for weeks on horseback, sword in one hand, reins in the other. But during a chase scene, early in filming, he lost control. The horse reared, he slipped and landed hard, shoulder, spine, hip. The injury wasn't catastrophic, but it was serious enough to shut down production for nearly a month. The studio scrambled, schedules unraveled, insurance claims loomed, and for Banderas, the pain lingered long after filming resumed. He pushed through the rest of production, sometimes barely able to raise his arm between takes. Some action scenes were reblocked to limit his movement. Others were trimmed in editing. But what you see on screen? That's not a flawless hero. It's an actor powering through real pain with every lunge and flourish. Zorro was always supposed to bleed for justice, but in Banderas' case, the wounds were real, and they never quite healed. 7. The candle scene took 3 days and almost burned the set. You know the scene. Elena enters the training hall. Zorro waits in the shadows. A sword duel begins, light, flirtatious, crackling with tension. The room glows, not with natural light, but with hundreds of candles, real ones. No CGI, no filters, just fire. Director Martin Campbell wanted a dreamlike quality, something sensual and surreal. What he got was a logistical nightmare. The set required hundreds of open flames, each one needing to be hand-lit before the cameras rolled and extinguished after every take. The heat was unbearable. Actors sweated off makeup mid-duel. Zeta-Jones' corset had to be loosened between takes so she wouldn't faint. And during one setup, a low-swinging blade came within inches of tipping a pillar of wax and flame onto the set floor. The crew scrambled. A fire marshal was called. The scene was paused, relit, and shot again, over and over. In total, it took 3 full days to shoot less than 4 minutes of screen time. But it worked. That sequence became one of the film's most iconic, a dance of seduction and steel, bathed in golden glow. Just remember, the sparks weren't just metaphorical. That set was one misstep away from becoming an inferno. 8. Zorro's costume was sewn by hand, using 19th century techniques. It looks sleek, almost effortless. The hat, the mask, the sweeping cape. But Zorro's costume wasn't just a stylized superhero outfit. It was a work of historical obsession. Costume designer Graciela Masson insisted the wardrobe be constructed using authentic 19th century tailoring techniques. That meant hand-stitched seams, natural dyes, leatherwork aged with real wear, and garments designed to move like armor in action, yet appear fluid in stillness. The hat, called a sombrero cordobés, was custom-shaped to match traditional Spanish cavalry designs with subtle stylization for silhouette flair. The mask, made from layered black silk and stitched to create a seamless fit that wouldn't slip during stunts. Even the boots were cobbled in Mexico by craftsmen who used century-old patterns. Banderas was fitted multiple times, and each costume variation was designed to reflect character progression, more polished as Alejandro grows into Zorro. Zeta-Jones's dresses, too, followed strict period logic. Corsets, petticoats, stays, and fabrics sourced from Spanish textile archives. It's the kind of detail you don't notice consciously, but feel instinctively. When Zorro moves, he doesn't just look like a legend, he wears the weight of history, one stitch at a time. 9. The final duel was choreographed like a flamenco. Sword fights in movies often feel like chaotic slashes, noise for the sake of tension, but not in The Mask of Zorro. The final duel between Alejandro and Captain Love, Zorro versus Colonizer, was choreographed with a very different rhythm, flamenco. Swordmaster Bob Anderson, who also worked on Star Wars and The Princess Bride, and Martin Campbell wanted the last fight to feel emotional, not just physical. So they built it around the pulse of flamenco. Sharp footwork, sudden pauses, spirals of tension and explosion. Banderas, already trained in flamenco dancing, worked the movements into his swordplay, pivots, grounded stances, flourishes between strikes. Even the angles of the blade mimicked the flicks of a flamenco dancer's wrist. Captain Love, in contrast, was choreographed with colonial stiffness, rigid movements, aggressive thrusts, less rhythm, more brute force. The result is a fight that feels like a cultural metaphor, wild passion clashing with imperial arrogance, and every clang of the blade is a beat in a dance older than either character. So when you rewatch that final showdown, don't just see two men fighting. See a rhythm, a dance, a duel performed like poetry carved in steel. 10. The movie almost had a completely different ending. Originally, The Mask of Zorro wasn't supposed to end with a kiss and a cradle. The early drafts were darker, more tragic, and far less romantic. In one version, Don Diego dies without reconciling with Elena. Alejandro rides off alone, and the film ends with a grave. Zorro buried, legend intact, legacy uncertain. Spielberg vetoed it. He wanted catharsis, not despair. Another version had Alejandro disappear into exile, hunted for killing Captain Love. Too bleak, too disconnected from the hero's journey. So the ending we got, Zorro defeating his enemy, reclaiming his child, and embracing love, wasn't just the product of happy storytelling. It was engineered to complete the arc of a myth. By showing Alejandro at peace, the movie confirms something crucial. Zorro isn't just a mask for vengeance. He's a symbol of hope, rebirth, and family. That final shot, Alejandro telling the story of Zorro to his newborn son, isn't just sentimental. It's structural closure. The torch has been passed. The legend continues. And Spielberg got what he wanted, a modern myth with a classic ending. But somewhere, in an alternate cut, Zorro vanishes into the shadows, and the legend ends in silence. 11. The production was almost shut down by an earthquake. Midway through filming, the earth moved, literally. On October 17, 1997, a powerful 6.9 magnitude earthquake struck near Los Angeles. It was felt across the state and right through the film's production base. Cast and crew were in the middle of prepping a major stunt sequence when the quake hit. Equipment rattled, lights swung, sets cracked, production halted, not just for safety, but for reassessment. Structural damage forced the team to delay several sequences, especially those involving high scaffolding and suspended props. Insurance agents descended. Safety consultants ran drills. For a few tense days, it looked like Zorro might be postponed indefinitely or scrapped altogether. But Campbell, ever the warhorse, refused to quit. He reorganized the schedule, pulled forward dialogue scenes, and had his crew repair sets on the fly. Remarkably, no one was injured. But the atmosphere changed. You can feel it in the film's tension, an extra edge in every sword clash, an urgency behind the performances. The quake became part of the production's DNA, a reminder that even legends built on fantasy are subject to the tremors of the real world. When Zorro cracks his whip, the earth answers, because once upon a shoot, it actually did. 12. Captain Love was based on a real historical monster. He's charming, polished, utterly sadistic. Captain Harrison Love isn't just a villain, he's a colonizer in military dress, hiding sociopathy behind a smile. But what most viewers don't know is, he was inspired by a real person. The film's writers based him loosely on Captain John Sutter's enforcers, men who managed indigenous labor during California's gold rush with brutal, unchecked violence. One particular figure stood out, an American cavalry officer known for collecting trophies from executed natives and Mexican rebels. A perfect historical ghost for a fictional monster. In early drafts, Love's cruelty was more overt. Scenes showed him branding prisoners, desecrating bodies, and engaging in psychological warfare. Most of it was cut to keep the PG-13 rating, but the implications remained. His name, Love, was chosen for irony. A man named for affection, defined by annihilation. Actor Matt Letcher leaned into that contrast, performing him like a Southern aristocrat with a killer's impulse, somewhere between polite dinner guest and cobra in uniform. He doesn't just antagonize Zorro, he personifies everything the legend stands against. So when the final duel comes, and Zorro takes him down, it isn't just revenge, it's history being corrected, one slash at a time. 13. Banderas was almost replaced due to his accent. Antonio Banderas is Zorro. That's not up for debate. But during early pre-production, studio execs had doubts. Not about his charm, not about his swordplay, but about his accent. Banderas, still relatively new to American cinema, had a thick Andalusian Spanish inflection that worried DreamWorks. Could audiences understand him? Would his English feel too foreign for a mainstream swashbuckler? There were serious talks of dubbing some of his lines, or worse, recasting entirely. Spielberg reportedly intervened, insisting that Banderas' voice was essential to the film's identity. Zorro wasn't just a character, he was a cultural reclamation. A Mexican legend, played by a Spanish actor speaking in his native cadence. Campbell agreed, and Banderas, determined to prove them wrong, worked tirelessly with dialect coaches, finessing his line delivery without flattening his voice. What emerged wasn't perfect English. It was Zorro's English, romantic, musical, dangerous. The accent became part of the seduction. You believe this man can charm enemies and slice through armies because his voice carries the same rhythm as his blade. He didn't hide it, he weaponized it. And in doing so, he didn't just keep the role, he redefined it for a new generation. 14. The exploding bridge was real, and it almost took the crew with it. You know the shot. Zorro rides across a wooden bridge, turns back, and boom. The whole thing explodes in a wall of flame. It's a classic practical effect moment. But what you don't see is how close that scene came to becoming a real-life disaster. The bridge was built over a dried-out riverbed in a remote area of Mexico, rigged with explosives and set to detonate with precise timing once Banderas cleared the midpoint. But during the first take, a miscommunication caused the pyrotechnics crew to trigger the blast half a second early. The horse panicked. Banderas barely hung on. Debris rained down, and part of the crew filming from a nearby hilltop got hit with smoke and shrapnel. No one was seriously injured, but it was enough to shut down the shoot for 2 days, while safety protocols were re-evaluated. Banderas insisted on riding again for the reshoot, even though the insurance team begged him to use a double. He refused. "If Zorro runs," he reportedly said, "he's not Zorro." The second take went smoothly, but that fireball you see on screen, it's not CGI. It's fear, real explosives, real risk, and one hell of a narrow escape. 15. Zorro was originally meant to die at the end. In the earliest drafts, Zorro doesn't ride off into legend. He rides straight into martyrdom. The plan was for Alejandro to die defeating Captain Love, sacrificing himself to save Elena and the people of California. Don Diego would survive, bury his apprentice, and reclaim the mask for one last tragic ride. Spielberg didn't like it, not because it lacked drama, but because it lacked hope. "Zorro's not Batman," he allegedly told the writers. "He doesn't brood, he inspires." So the script was reworked. The tragedy was transferred to Don Diego, who dies in the arms of the daughter he thought he'd lost. Alejandro lives, inherits the mantle, and walks into the sunset with a family and a future. But the ghost of that original ending lingers in the film's tone. You feel it in the way Alejandro hesitates before putting on the mask, in the funeral pyre energy of the final duel. Even the score swells like a goodbye. Somewhere deep in the DNA of the Mask of Zorro is a story about sacrifice, but Spielberg's rewrite turned it into something bigger. A story about legacy. Because sometimes, a hero doesn't have to die to become immortal.